When do students start to think about testing, and what should they be doing in anticipation of that?
PSAT occurs in October of junior year.
Junior year.
And so what I usually suggest is the summer before junior year that the students get some tutoring for basically to help them know how to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
I also find that when they're tutored, they go in feeling more confident, and usually the scores are better.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they can do is continue the tutoring and then take the real SAT or the real ACT in the fall or early winter of their junior year. I find that if their testing gets done during junior year, it's one major piece that's out of the picture.
Gotcha. And when you talk about tutoring, do you like the private tutors? Do you like the corporations like Chiton? I know some of the schools provide tutoring. Do you have any preferences?
Well, so I usually suggest that you just benefit far more from having private tutors. And there are a lot of companies that supply that. Chiton has private tutors. Summit has private tutors. I'm sure Princeton Review has private tutors, you know, so that the important thing is to find a tutor and also make sure that tutor is giving you what you need. So the student has to give some feedback to say, is this tutor teaching me in my learning style?
So now we're into that fall of junior year. And we have choices. We have choices between SAT, ACT, or nothing. I mean, some schools don't require testing anymore. Do you have a view on that?
They're giving, I know Chiton and Summit give a test to let you know which one you would do better on. What I like about the ACT is you can take it every month and only send in one set of scores.
SAT doesn't work that way.
SATs, well, I think SAT got very concerned that people were changing, because all of a sudden people started to use the ACT, and I think the College Board was losing money.
Against SAT or ACT?
No, people always ask that question.
Gotcha. So the testing should all be finished by when?
I like the testing to be done by the end of junior year.
Okay.
I find that they can always go back in again senior year to take the test again, but I don't want them to have to.
To have to. Gotcha. Gotcha. So now let's say we've taken the right tests and we're pretty satisfied with our scores. And now it's time to start visiting some schools. Talk about the visitation and selection process before you're in. How do you do that?
What I do is I see usually my juniors, I see them starting in February of their junior year, because before then they're busy taking tests and I'm busy finishing seniors.
Right.
What I do at that point is I know their grades and I know their PSAT scores, and I even sometimes know SAT or ACT scores. And then I sit down with them and I make a list. Now, how do I know how to do a list? Everybody asks me that. I don't know. It's years of doing this, and I visit colleges constantly, so I have an idea of the chemistry of the students on various campuses and what academic level, and so then I make the list that way. And I try to do various levels of schools. So like reaches, probables.
The really hard ones, the aspiring schools.
Yeah, and I usually don't like to tell them which is which, because I don't want them to say, oh, I like this school, it's the hardest one to get into. So I just sort of say, go look at it and tell me your comments. And usually when they go to visit, I want to see them after they've seen a few schools.
What's a good school visit? I mean, if I'm going to go visit UMass or Holy Cross, I mean, parents with parents?
Yes, because you have another set of eyes, which is always helpful.
Spend a day, half a day?
At least a half a day. Go to the information session, get an interview, because then it shows them that you're interested. Do a tour.
You should do an interview when you go.
Well, if it's a faraway school, do an interview. If it's a school that you can easily return to,
I see.
Don't do it the first time, because I always say visit the school without visit a few schools without an interview the first time you're out there looking, and then you get to be an experienced looker, so then you can interview. But if you're going any place like Wisconsin or whatever, and they offer interviews, do it, because it's much more difficult, of course, to get back there.
And do you like going with a student guide, or you like wandering around on your own?
No, have a tour, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely take a guided tour, but sometimes you can have a real unappealing tour guide. So you have to be careful not to judge the school by the tour guide, because sometimes you can have an absolutely wonderful tour guide and the school is not for you.
Right.
So you have to be very careful, and I know that's very difficult for students to do, but that's why it's good to have a parent along, because you get another perspective.
But extracurricular
activities, right.
How do you help people with their activities and describing them?
Well, it's pretty straightforward on the Common App. Most of the schools use the Common Application, which makes it easier because you just don't have to fill out your name and address 300 times or 20 times when you're applying. But each of the schools usually has a supplement, which has either a short answer question or an essay, a second essay.
What do you think of, what's a lot of extracurriculars? What's enough extracurriculars?
Well, what happens is the schools are basically asking, they're very interested if you have a passion.
Yeah.
They don't need to see that you've belonged to 100 clubs. They would love to see that you have one thing that you're really, really interested in.
And I presume when you are in clubs, they'd rather see leadership positions.
Yes, they want to see
president,
that you were the
vice
head
president
of this.
kind of thing. And so that's something you can start thinking about even in sophomore year.
Oh, you have to
positioning
start
yourself
then.
for that.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha.
They really want to see that you can take a leadership role.
Right. And when do you start cultivating recommendations?
Well, I would even say at the end of junior year, it's a good idea to ask teachers if they would write, do you feel comfortable writing my recommendation? That way they could say yes or no. But I would sort of reserve them so that
So line them up, get them committed at the end of junior year while they're still fresh in their mind.
Exactly.
And then you come back to them in the fall of senior year.
And say, okay, these are the 10 places I'm applying to.
Gotcha. What about non-teacher recommendations?
Well, if you're,
wealthy alums, people that you know. I mean, do you recommend that?
I would say if you have a coach or you're into dance or there's something else that you do outside of school, have that person write for you because you've given, especially when you've put in a lot of time.
So now we're in the getting ready for application, sort of the pre-application process. So you've gotten your SATs behind you, you've visited a lot of schools. What comes next?
Well, what I like to do is, as you're visiting, during the summer before your senior year, if you can start writing an essay about some aspect of yourself. Don't write about
summer
before.
Before the summer.
Yeah, because it's much easier to write an essay when you don't have a math test the next day.
So that's summer is a critical
summer. When I'm working with students, whoever's home comes in to see me, and I said, let's get this essay going. And we brainstorm what's a good topic, something personal, something that really affected you and that you changed. And it's hard because 17-year-olds haven't had a lot of things affecting them. We hope, you know.
Do you typically just need one essay?
Sometimes you need two. Like Harvard needs two, Brown needs two, University of Richmond needs two.
But the titles are fairly predictable. I mean, they're pretty wide open.
You can just, exactly. With the essays, it's very good to get some outside opinions, but you have to be very careful not to do that the last minute and not to get too many opinions because everybody will rewrite what you said and your voice is gone. So be careful. I mean, the English teacher can give opinions. You don't have to take every opinion that you hear.
But it's for edits and mistakes kind of thing, not for
There's a different pair of eyes.
And so then how about, as you're starting to think about applications, identifying some connections you might have with the school? Is it too soon for that? I mean, when do you start?
What do you mean by connections?
Well, friends, you know, other graduates. I mean, where do they come into the process?
Oh, while you're deciding. Well, if you have a friend at a school, it's really great to go and visit your friend, but you have to be careful that you didn't have a really good time at the school because you really like your friend.
Right, because it was
but
really
you really
the school.
see what your friend's life is like. So you have to be really very good at evaluating.
How many applications, how many schools does your typical person apply to?
Well, each year it seems to get more because everybody gets more nervous.
Right.
But I think we're averaging around between 12 and 15 schools.
12 and 15,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Question about early decisions
yeah.
and early action.
Right.
What's your thinking around that?
Well, it used to be that I didn't really like early decision because I didn't feel that you could tell in the beginning of your senior year what was going to be right a year from then. But then it got to the point that schools were taking 50% of the class early, so I changed my opinion.
So it was easier to get in if you did early decision, and a lot easier, 50%.
If you didn't apply early, you just did not have as good a chance.
Does it make a difference what school you apply to within the school? In other words, I've heard that at some schools it's easier to get into a certain department, maybe a nursing or education, than it is to get into arts and sciences
or the business school.
And you can always switch once you're there. And how do you find out about that, other than having the college coach?
Well, you can ask me. That's how. Or I don't think that a school is going to say, "Oh, apply to the ed department because you have an easier time." So that's when you have to speak to people who
you got to know. But that is true, though.
It is true.
And is that true across a large number of colleges that there are?
Well, no. A lot of schools don't accept by major.
I see.
But then there are those that if you apply to a specific. I found last year the people who applied to business, the business division, had more difficult time getting in.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Exactly.
So when those envelopes start coming, when I was going through this process, I remember the fat envelopes were good and the skinny envelopes were not good.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. One of my sons, in fact, applied to Cornell, and he got a skinny envelope, and it said, "You're in," because they don't send the housing information.
Oh, I see.
And I had one student who threw the envelope away and then took it out of the trash and found out he was on a wait list. So you have to open up the skinnies.
All the envelopes.
And some of them.
But are all the fat envelopes good?
All the fat envelopes are definitely you're in. Okay. But skinny envelopes do not mean you're not.
All right.
So check it out.
I'll give parents a tip if they want to create some memories, some wonderful memories.
Okay.
We started checking the mailbox every single day when we knew it was going to be about that time. And when we got the fat envelopes, we didn't open them, we didn't do anything with them. We just waited for our daughter to get around to going through her mail, but we had the video camera ready.
Oh, is
so
that
we had the
nice?
Video camera ready when she opened the fat envelope. And that's a memory that they love to watch over and over and over. So I strongly recommend that.
That's wonderful.
So, so now maybe you've gotten 2 or 3 yeses. And that's hopefully in the early part of your, the winter of your senior year. How do you decide?
Well, they run prospective student weekends, the schools do. And I highly encourage people to go to them because you see other students who are also considering attending the school. And really, at that point, it's a kid pick. Because you want to see, do I like these people? Do I want to stay up all night and talk to them? You may choose a school that's academically, who knows what's what, but maybe rated slightly lower because the kids are much more your type. And that's a very important thing. So I would definitely go to the prospective student weekends and just see what, I think it's easy to make a decision when the invitation's in your pocket.
Absolutely. The leverage has flipped. Now all of a sudden you're the buyer.